Commander Jinwoo stretched in his captain's chair aboard the Zalari patrol cruiser Gentle Current. The soft blue glow of the bridge controls reflected off his pale green skin as he watched the endless stars drift past the view screen. His crew of 6 moved quietly around the bridge, checking instruments and monitoring communications with the practiced ease of beings who had been patrolling. Empty space for months, the Terran exclusion zone was supposed to be the most dangerous sector. In this part of the galaxy, at least that's what the Galactic Council kept telling everyone, Jinwoo had heard the stories countless times during briefings back at headquarters. Humans were violent. Humans were unpredictable. Humans came from a death world so harsh it had turned them into monsters who solved every problem with violence. Jinwoo didn't buy it. He'd been patrolling the edges of human space for 3 years now, and he'd never seen anything more threatening than the occasional merchant vessel passing through neutral territory. The humans kept to themselves, mostly. They had their own trade routes, their own colonies, their own business. Sure, they'd fought a war with the Kethran Empire 15 years ago, but everyone fought wars. That didn't make them the galaxy-ending threat the Council made them out to be. Commander called out Ensign Vila from the sensor station. Her voice carried the musical quality typical of their species. "I'm picking up something unusual at bearing 2-7-Mark-4. Jinwoo turned his attention to the main display. Small blip appeared on the screen, roughly 3 light minutes away. The computer was already analyzing the signal, running it through their database of known vessel types. "What do you make of it?" Jinwoo asked, leaning forward with interest. Anything that broke the monotony of patrol duty was welcome. "It's definitely artificial," Vila replied, her fingers dancing across her console. "The energy signature is weak, almost like emergency power in Commander ... The computer identifies it as human in origin." A ripple of tension went through the bridge crew. They all knew the regulations. No contact with human vessels. No interference in human affairs. Observe from a distance and report back to command. The Terran exclusion zone existed for a reason, and that reason was keeping the peace between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. "Life signs?" Jinwoo asked. "Faint but present." "Maybe a dozen individuals aboard." Bella paused, then added quietly, "Commander, their distress beacon is active. They're calling for help." Jinwoo stared at the screen. The regulations were clear, but so was his conscience. His people, the Zalari, had built their entire civilization on the principle of helping others. They were natural peacekeepers, mediators, helpers. The idea of leaving sentient beings to die in the cold vacuum of space went against everything he believed in. "Sir," his first officer spoke up nervously. "The protocols specifically state—" "I know what the protocols state," Jinwoo interrupted. He stood up, his decision made. "But we're not going to sit here and watch people die because some bureaucrats are afraid of humans. Set course for that vessel. We're going to help them." The bridge fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the ship's engines as they changed course toward the mysterious human vessel captain. Minji wiped the sweat from her forehead as another explosion rocked the Cassandra's dream. The lights flickered. On the bridge, casting eerie shadows across the faces of her worried crew, red warning lights bathed everything in an angry glow while alarms blared throughout the ship. "Engineering report," she called out, gripping the arm of her captain's chair as the ship shuddered again. Chief Engineer Dong-Yoon's voice crackled through the intercom, barely audible over the sound of sparking circuits and venting gas. "Captain, we've got a complete fusion core breach. The containment field is failing and I can't stop it. We need to shut down everything now or we're all dead." Minji felt her stomach drop. Fusion core breach meant they were about to lose their main power source. Without it, they'd have no engines, no life support, and no way to call for help. The Cassandra's dream was a simple cargo hauler, not a military vessel. They didn't have backup systems for this kind of emergency. "Do it," she ordered. 8, shut. It down. The ship went dark. Emergency lighting kicked in a few seconds later, casting everything in a dim blue glow.
Ow.
The constant hum of the engines that had been their companion for months fell silent. Now there was only the quiet whisper of emergency life support and the nervous breathing of her crew. "How long do we have?" Minji asked. "On emergency power?" Maybe 18 hours before the air gets too thin to breathe, replied her first officer, Hunwoo. He was young, only 26, and this was his first deep space assignment. She could see the fear in his eyes, but he was trying to stay calm. For the crew, Mingi looked around the bridge at her 12 crew members. They were good people. Most of them had families back on Earth or one of the colonies. Dong-Yoon had twin daughters who were starting school next month. Hyunwoo was engaged to a teacher on Mars. They trusted her to get them home safely. Activate the emergency beacon, she ordered. Hyunwoo moved to the communications station and began the startup sequence. Captain, you know the beacon will reach more than just rescue ships, right? The military frequency is integrated into the system. Minji nodded. She knew exactly what that meant. When humanity had first ventured into deep space 50 years ago, they'd learned the hard way that the galaxy wasn't always friendly. The Kethran Empire had attacked without warning, destroying 3 colony ships and killing thousands of civilians. After that tragedy, Earth's government had established the Emergency Response Protocol. Every human ship's distress beacon was programmed to automatically alert not just civilian rescue services, but every military installation within range. I don't care who answers, Minji said firmly. As long as someone comes. The beacon activated with a soft chime. Invisible signals began racing through subspace at faster than light speeds, carrying a simple message: humans in distress, immediate assistance required. The signal would reach the nearest rescue station in about 4 hours. But it would also reach the Terran Defense Force bases on Luna, Mars, and Proxima Centauri in less than 30 minutes. What none of them knew was that this particular distress call would do more than just summon help. It would wake up a sleeping giant that had been quietly watching the galaxy's edge. Waiting for exactly this kind of situation, Commander Jinwoo studied the human vessel through his ship's view screen. The Cassandra's Dream looked dead in space. With no engine glow and minimal lighting, scorch marks along its hull showed where the fusion core had vented plasma before shutting down. His heart went out to the crew trapped inside. Hailed them, he ordered his communications officer. No response. Sir, their main systems appear to be offline. Ginwoo made his decision. Prepare a boarding party. We'll dock with their ship and offer assistance directly. His first officer looked nervous. Commander regulations state that any contact with humans requires prior authorization from command. Those people are dying, Jinwoo replied firmly. We can ask for forgiveness later. 20 minutes later, Jinwoo led a team of 4 Zalari through the docking tube, connecting their ships. They wore their standard environmental suits, which were bulky white affairs with built-in atmospheric processors. Each carried a plasma cutter for emergency, hull breaches, and a medical kit designed for their species, the airlock on the human. Ship was different from anything they'd seen before. Instead of the smooth, curved designs common throughout the galaxy, it was angular and functional. Warning signs in multiple languages covered the walls, though none of them could read the alien text. Atmosphere is breathable, reported Ensign Vela, checking her scanner. Though it's a bit thick for our lungs. The inner door opened with a mechanical grinding sound. Emergency lighting cast long shadows down the corridor beyond. Ginwoo stepped forward, hoping to find the human crew and offer help. That's when everything went wrong. The moment his plasma cutter crossed the threshold, alarms began screaming throughout the ship. 8. Red lights flashed as automated systems identified the energy signature as a weapon. The ship's computer, running on emergency protocols, assumed they were being boarded by hostiles. Warning: armed intruders detected. A mechanical voice announced in heavily accented Standard Galactic. Initiating defensive measures. Heavy blast doors slammed shut behind them, trapping the boarding party inside. The corridor filled with a white gas that made their eyes water even through their suits. Ginwoo heard the sound of running footsteps and shouting voices from deeper in the ship. We're not enemies, called out, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Captain Mingi appeared at the far end of the corridor, flanked by 3 crew members. They looked terrified and desperate, which made them dangerous. In the dim light, the Zalari's white environmental suits probably looked like some kind of alien battle armor. Stay back, Minji shouted, raising a plasma torch she'd grabbed from the engineering bay. We won't go down without a fight. Please, we're here to help. Jinwoo tried to explain, but his words were drowned out by the continuing alarms. In the confusion, Ensign Vela stumbled backward and accidentally triggered her plasma cutter. The bright blue beam shot across the corridor, barely missing Minji's head and burning a hole in the wall behind her. "They're attacking," one of the humans yelled. What followed was pure chaos. The humans scattered, some running deeper into the ship, while others tried to fight back with whatever tools they could find. Vela, panicking, fired her plasma cutter again, this time hitting a power conduit that exploded in a shower of sparks. The explosion knocked Jinwoo to his knees and sent Mingi tumbling backward. When the smoke cleared, both sides had injuries and neither understood what had just happened. "Fall back." Jinwoo ordered his team. Everyone back to the ship. 20 minutes later, safe aboard the Gentle Current, Jinwoo stared at the human vessel with a mix of confusion and fear. His peaceful rescue mission had turned into something that looked like an attack. He had no choice but to report what had happened. "Send a priority transmission to the Galactic Council," he told his communications officer. "Tell them we've had a hostile encounter with unpredictable Deathworlders." The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of receiving Commander Jinwoo's report. The massive circular chamber on the neutral world of Nexus Prime buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 47 different species took their seats. The holographic display at the center showed the location of the incident. A small red dot in what should have been empty space, Council President Theron. A tall being with silver skin and 4 arms called the session to order. Her voice carried the weight of authority that had kept the galaxy peaceful for over a century. "We have received disturbing reports from the Terran exclusion zone. Fleet Admiral Wanho will brief us on the situation." Admiral Wanho stood at the center of the chamber, his blue uniform crisp and professional. He was one of the few military leaders who had actually fought in the last major galactic war, and his experience showed in every word he spoke. The holographic display shifted to show the damaged human vessel and the Zelleria patrol ship nearby. At 1400 hours, Commander Jinwoo of the Zellari patrol vessel Gentle Current encountered a human ship in apparent distress. Wanho began. Following standard humanitarian protocols, he attempted to render assistance. The humans responded with immediate violence, using energy weapons against the rescue party. Worried murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Zellari were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful beings. If they reported violence, it must have been severe. The human vessel, designated Cassandra's Dream, appears to be a cargo hauler. Wanho continued. However, our analysis suggests it may have been conducting reconnaissance operations in the exclusion zone. The violent response to peaceful contact fits the established pattern of human aggression. Representative Keldvar from the Andromedan Trade Federation raised one of his tentacles. "Are we certain this wasn't a misunderstanding?" The Zellari report mentions language barriers and system malfunctions. "The evidence is clear," Wanho replied firmly. The humans fired first, without provocation. 3 Zellari personnel were injured, and the human vessel remains in an aggressive posture. "We cannot allow this behavior to escalate." President Theron nodded gravely. "What do you recommend, Admiral?" "I propose a containment response. We deploy sufficient force to neutralize the threat before it can spread. The humans have shown they cannot be reasoned with, so we must respond in the only language they understand." The chamber fell silent. A containment response was serious business, reserved for only the most dangerous situations. It meant treating the human vessel as a military threat rather than a civilian emergency. "How many ships?" asked Representative Zorthok from the Hegemony worlds. 3 battlecruisers and the dreadnought Eternal Peace, Wanho replied. "More than enough to handle a single cargo vessel, but sufficient to send a message that aggressive behavior will not be tolerated." The vote was swift and decisive. 39 representatives voted in favor, with only 8 abstentions. The containment response was authorized. Within minutes, the order went out across the galaxy's military networks. The 7th Fleet, stationed at the border fortress of Kepler Station, began immediate preparations for deployment. 3 massive battle cruisers, each carrying a crew of thousands, powered up their engines. The dreadnought, Eternal Peace, a ship so large it had its own artificial gravity, began the slow process of leaving dock. What none of them knew was that their communication networks weren't as secure as they believed. Deep in the asteroid fields of the Outer Rim, a small human listening post picked up the fleet orders. The intelligence officer on duty, a young woman named Yunji, couldn't believe what she was reading. "Sir," she called to her supervisor, "you need to see this. The Galactic Council just authorized a military strike against a human civilian vessel." The message was encrypted and transmitted to Earth Command within minutes. The sleeping giant was about to wake up. Admiral Sajane stared at the tactical display as warning lights flashed across the command center. 3 separate crisis alerts had arrived within minutes of each other, each one demanding immediate attention. The first was an SOS signal from the merchant vessel Cassandra's Dream, transmitting from deep space with casualties aboard. The second was intelligence data, showing alien warships moving toward human territory. The third was perhaps the most troubling official word that the Galactic Council had reclassified their rescue mission as a military threat. The Admiral's weathered hands moved across the control panel with practiced efficiency. Years of defending humanity's scattered colonies had taught him that when multiple crises hit at once, it usually meant someone was orchestrating events from behind the scenes. He pulled up the emergency protocols that most military commanders hoped they would never need to use. "Communications, get me direct channels to all colony defense coordinators," Seojin ordered. His voice carried the calm authority that had earned him respect across a dozen star systems. "Priority Alpha clearance." The communications officer nodded, fingers flying across her console. Within moments, holographic displays flickered to life around the command center. Colony administrators, defense chiefs, and militia leaders appeared one by one, their faces showing concern as they realized the scope of the emergency call. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a developing situation," the Admiral began, his tone measured, "but urgent. One of our civilian ships is under attack. Alien forces are mobilizing against us, and the Council has decided to treat our rescue efforts as an act of war. I'm calling in every favor, every agreement, and every alliance we've built." Over the years, the colony representatives exchanged glances. These were hardworking people who had carved out lives on frontier worlds. Far from the comfortable bureaucracy of Earth, they understood that when Admiral Seojin made a call like this, humanity's survival was at stake. Commander Torres from the mining colonies spoke first. "What do you need, Admiral?" "Our defense platforms are old, but they still pack a punch. Freight haulers from the agricultural worlds can be retrofitted with defensive systems," added Director Chen from the farming settlements. "We've done it before during the border disputes." One by one, the colony leaders pledged their support. Some offered ships, others provided weapons or supplies, and a few promised to activate their local defense militias. These weren't professional soldiers, they were miners, farmers, engineers, and traders who had learned to fight because the galaxy had given them no choice. Admiral Seojin felt a familiar surge of pride in humanity's resilience. While other species relied on massive centralized fleets, humans had learned to adapt and improvise. Their scattered colonies might seem weak individually, but together they formed a network of mutual support that had kept them alive in a hostile universe. "Prep for immediate deployment," he commanded. "We're going to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten human civilians. The Deathworld doesn't abandon its own." Across human space, ships began powering up their engines, ready to answer the call. The void of space began to shimmer with the arrival of humanity's response fleet. First came the heavy carriers from Mars, their massive hulls bristling with fighter bays and defense turrets. These were the workhorses of human military might, each one capable of deploying hundreds of small craft while maintaining heavy fire support. The Martian crews had grown up in the harsh environment of the Red Planet, where a single mistake could mean death for an entire colony dome. From the Centauri system, sleek fast-tack squadrons materialized out of hyperspace jumps. These ships were built for speed and precision strikes, their crews trained in the art of hit-and-run warfare. The pilots who flew these vessels had learned their trade defending the mining operations around Alpha Centauri, where alien raiders had tested human, resolved countless times over the decades. But it was the arrival of the Ghost Fleet that sent ripples of unease through any enemy sensors watching the gathering. These stealth destroyers from the Outer Rim colonies appeared and disappeared like phantoms, their advanced cloaking technology making them nearly invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. The crews of these ships were legends among human military circles, recruited from the most dangerous frontier worlds, where survival depended on being invisible to hostile forces. Captain Rodriguez watched the tactical display aboard her command cruiser as more ships continued to arrive. Each vessel represented a different human colony, a different way of life, but all united by the same fierce determination to protect their own. She had served alongside crews from dozens of worlds, and each group brought their own unique skills to the fight. The engineering teams from the asteroid mining stations understood how to keep ships running with minimal resources. Fighter pilots from the agricultural worlds had learned precision flying while defending their crops from alien pest swarms. Marines from the industrial planets could fight in any environment, having grown up breathing recycled air and walking on metal decks. Fleet strength now at 212 vessels, reported her tactical officer. All ships report ready for combat operations. Captain Rodriguez nodded, feeling the weight of command. This wasn't just a military operation. It was a statement to the galaxy about what humanity stood for. Every ship in the fleet carried crew members who had grown up on Earth or worlds settled by Earth's children. They understood violence in a way that most galactic species couldn't comprehend, because they had evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill them. The communication channels buzzed with status, reports, and tactical updates. Ship commanders shared intelligence, coordinated supply lines, and prepared for the battle ahead. Despite coming from different colonies scattered across local space, these crews worked together with the efficiency born of shared heritage and common purpose. As the last stragglers arrived at the rendezvous point, the assembled fleet represented the largest human military response in recent history. Over 200 ships, thousands of crew members, and enough firepower to level a small moon. The galaxy was about to learn why humans were called the children of the Deathworld. The Council fleet dropped out of hyperspace with the confidence of a routine enforcement action. Admiral Wanho stood on the bridge of his flagship, expecting to find nothing more than a single damaged human merchant vessel and perhaps a small rescue ship. His fleet of 4 heavy cruisers and their escort vessels should have been more than adequate to handle whatever primitive response the humans might mount. Instead, the sensor arrays immediately began screaming warnings that made his bridge crew step back in shock. The space around them was filled with massive subspace distortions as ship after ship materialized from faster-than-light travel. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their arrival timed with military precision that spoke of years of coordinated training. "Sir, we're detecting multiple capital ships," his tactical officer reported, voice climbing with each new contact. "Correction, dozens of capital ships. Sir, I'm reading over 200 vessels, and the count is still climbing." Admiral Wanho felt his confidence evaporate as the tactical display updated. Where he had expected to find a handful of crude human ships, he now faced a fleet that dwarfed his own forces by an overwhelming margin. The human vessels ranged from massive carrier ships that could house entire fighter wings to sleek destroyers that seemed to appear and disappear on his sensors. "Open communications," he ordered, hoping diplomacy might salvage what had become an impossible situation. "Perhaps we can negotiate." His words were cut off as the human fleet's response came through on all frequencies. The voice that answered was calm, professional, and absolutely uncompromising. "Council vessels, this is Admiral Cyajin of the Terran Defense Force. You are interfering with a legitimate rescue operation in violation of multiple galactic treaties. Stand down immediately and withdraw from this system, or you will be considered hostile forces and dealt with accordingly." The Council Fleet's communications officer looked to Admiral Wanho with wide eyes. "Sir, they're not requesting that we leave. They're ordering us to." Around them, the human ships began moving into attack formations with fluid precision. The massive carriers launched clouds of fighter craft that swarmed through space like angry insects. The fast tack squadrons spread out in hunting patterns, while the mysterious stealth vessels simply vanished from sensors entirely, their presence now marked only by the occasional shimmer of displaced starlight. Admiral Wanho realized he was facing a military force that had been designed for one purpose: to protect human lives at any cost. These weren't the scattered colonial defense forces that Council intelligence had reported. This was a coordinated war machine that had been mobilized across multiple star systems in response to a single distress call. Double quotes, "Sir, what are your orders?" his tactical officer asked, sweat beading on his forehead as he watched the human fleet complete their encirclement. Looking at the tactical display, Admiral Wanho saw his 4 cruisers and their escorts surrounded by more than 50 times their number. The humans had responded to what should have been a minor incident, with a kind of overwhelming force typically reserved for planetary invasions. The Council had clearly underestimated not just human military capability, but their willingness to use it. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "Begin withdrawal procedures. We're leaving." The massive dreadnought Righteous Fury dominated the center of the human formation, its hull scarred from countless battles, defending human colonies across the galaxy. Admiral Seogen stood on the bridge, watching as his communications officer established a direct link with the Council fleet. The moment had arrived for what humans called Deathworld diplomacy negotiations, backed by an overwhelming force and the absolute certainty that they would use it. "Admiral Wanho of the Council fleet, you are speaking with Admiral Seogen of the Terran Defense Force," came the crisp transmission across the void. "I believe we need to discuss the situation." The response from the Council flagship carried undertones of barely controlled panic. "Admiral Seogen, there appears to have been a misunderstanding. We are responding to reports of military buildup in this sector." Seogen's expression remained stone-cold as he replied, "The only military buildup here is the one you're looking at right now. 200 human warships, all armed, all crewed by people who grew up on a planet where everything tries to kill them from birth. We came here for one reason: to protect our civilians." Through the viewports, the Council crews could see the human fleet maintaining perfect formation despite their overwhelming numbers. Fighter squadrons moved in precise patterns, their pilots executing maneuvers that would have been impossible for most galactic species. The larger ships held position with the kind of discipline that only came from crews who had learned to work together under the most extreme conditions. "Your intelligence reports were clearly inadequate," Seogen continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You expected to find a damaged merchant vessel and maybe a rescue ship. Instead, you found the combined military might of 12 human colonies, all of whom answered the call when their people were threatened." Admiral Wanho's voice came through the comm system with noticeable strain. "Surely we can reach some accommodation. The Council has no desire for armed conflict with humanity." "Then you should have thought of that before you classified our rescue mission as a military threat," Seogen replied without hesitation. "Let me make something perfectly clear, Admiral. We don't negotiate when human lives are at stake. We don't compromise when our civilians are in danger. We absolutely do not back down when faced with threats." The tactical displays on both fleets showed the human advantage in stark numerical terms. The Councils for cruisers and their escorts were completely surrounded by a force that could have conquered a medium-sized star system. Every human ship was battle-ready, their crews trained in combat doctrines that emphasized rapid escalation. "An overwhelming response? You have exactly 60 seconds to begin withdrawal procedures," Seogen announced. "Any delay will be interpreted as hostile intent, and we will respond accordingly. This is not a negotiation, it's a statement of fact." Silence that followed stretched across the void between the two fleets. Finally, Admiral Wanho's voice returned, defeated and hollow. "Council fleet is beginning withdrawal. It will not interfere with your operations." As the alien ships began powering up their hyperspace drives, every human crew member knew they had just witnessed something historic. The galaxy had learned that threatening human civilians would bring swift and overwhelming retaliation. The rescue operation proceeded without further interference from the Council fleet. Captain Minji and her crew were transferred to medical Ships within hours, their injuries treated by the finest doctors the human colonies could provide. As the wounded crew members recovered in the safety of human vessels, word of the confrontation spread throughout the galaxy at the speed of hyperspace communication. The impact was immediate and profound. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive newcomers suddenly found themselves reevaluating everything they thought they knew about Earth's children. The sight of over 200 human warships appearing in perfect coordination had shattered the carefully constructed narrative that humans were just lucky survivors. Clinging to the edges of galactic civilization, Admiral Siagan recognized an opportunity that had been handed to him. With the Council fleet retreating and the entire galaxy watching, he opened diplomatic channels that had been closed to humanity for decades. His message was simple and direct. Humanity was no longer asking for a seat at the galactic table. They were taking it. For too long, the Council has treated us as curiosities. Siagan announced during the first formal diplomatic transmission between humanity and the galactic government. You've studied us, categorized us, and tried to limit our expansion because you feared what we might become. Today, you've seen exactly what we are, a species that will cross the void itself to protect our own. The response from the council chambers was markedly different from their usual condescending tone. Representatives who had once spoken of humans as barely civilized now addressed them with the careful respect reserved for major military powers. The demonstration of human coordination and firepower had accomplished what decades of peaceful diplomacy had failed to achieve. Within weeks, formal treaties were signed, establishing humanity's right to unrestricted expansion and self-defense. The Council's previous restrictions on human military development were quietly withdrawn, and several species that had been considering aggressive actions against human colonies suddenly found more pressing concerns elsewhere. The story of the Cassandra's Dream Rescue became legend throughout human space. Children on frontier worlds grew up hearing how their people had answered the call when fellow humans were in danger. The tale was told in mining stations, agricultural domes, and industrial complexes across dozens of star systems, each version emphasizing the same core truth: no human fights alone. Captain Minji herself became an unwitting symbol of human resilience. Her decision to send the distress call rather than surrender had triggered a chain of events that fundamentally altered humanity's place in the galaxy. She often said in interviews that she had simply done what any human would do, refused to give up and trust that her people would come for her. The rescue mission had revealed something the galaxy hadn't understood about humanity. They weren't just survivors of a death world, they had internalized its lessons completely. Every human carried within them the absolute certainty that their species would respond to threats with overwhelming force and unwavering determination. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson about the children of Earth. They were no longer the newcomers seeking acceptance. They were equals who demanded respect, and they had the firepower to back up that demand.